Craftsman Days are here at Lowe's with big savings on the tools you need. Right now, get a free select tool when you buy the Craftsman V20 2-pack battery kit. Whether it's the backyard, the bathroom, or beyond, Craftsman has the tools to help you power through and get the project done right. Because DIYing is unpredictable, but your tools shouldn't be. Shop Craftsman at Lowe's today. Valid through 6/18 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hey, warmer from Evo! Welcome to Lovey Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you, as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Matt Modderno. He does great work over at the DMV Hoops Podcast. I know he's doing some great work with the Believe Podcast Network. He does work over at Mid-Major Madness and so much more. We're going to be recapping what has been a big day of moves in terms of NBA draft decisions from Tuesday. We saw Yaxel Lendeborg heading back to Michigan, Milos Uzan heading back to Houston, what that means for both of those teams, the outlook for both of those players for both of those teams as well, and we're going to be diving in on what we've seen out of Maryland over the last few weeks as well. Very much an interesting offseason with them hiring on Buzz Williams. They've went in a little bit of a different direction there, and the school that Buzz Williams left, Texas A&M, they have been receiving some nice residuals over the next few days. The fact that they've got Mackenzie Mbakbo coming back in the fold, they get Pops Isaacs because of everything that happens with Houston. We're going to be talking about that and so much more. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys a recap of all the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Tuesday. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, there's the naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they make sure that bettors are able to access their funds all day, every day. They make sure that bettors are able to have their funds available to them at the ready whenever they need to make a gambling-related transaction. They earn cashback rewards when they utilize EdgeBoost, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's talk with Mr. Matt, who's doing such a great job covering this game of basketball, both the college and the pro front end. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Matt Modderno. Last name is spelled Modderno. And Matt, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here, Greg. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And Matt, I know you're a man over there at Mid-Major Madness, so you've seen this guy over the last few years, and because you are a man that is out there in the great state of Maryland, out there in the DMV area, you're going to be seeing quite a bit of him over at Michigan. Yaxel Lendeborg decided that he was not going to stay in the NBA draft, even though many people thought that he was going to be a first-round pick. And just what does this mean for a Michigan team that I thought that they were going to be rock solid before, but I did not think that they were going to be getting Lendeborg. Now it appears as though they might be a real force out there in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're huge all of a sudden. You put him and Adai, the transfer from UCLA, together, and just look out. It's really interesting to see what they're trying to build with that program, because this is built off of what they did at FAU, where there was kind of 3 guards and a wing essentially around one center and Vlad Golden. He brings Vlad Golden with him from FAU and puts him with Danny Wolf last year in this kind of Twin Towers approach. Don't really have like the same sort of setup this year, because neither Lendeborg or Mara are the same playmaker Danny Wolf is. But either way, I think they're going to try to use Lendeborg in some of that same way and show, a few more of the skills that can help him move up draft boards next year. But yeah, at the very least, just good luck scoring over that front court.
Yeah, it is going to be incredible what we see there. And for Lendeborg, I know that he might not quite be Danny Wolf, but he was a 36% three-point shooter over at UAB, and at 6'9", he's maybe an inch or two shorter than Danny Wolf, but I do think that that dynamic of being able to add something to being able to pop it from three is going to be big, and I think that as well as I do for Michigan, their main kryptonite last year was turning the ball over. With Elliot Cadeau, I feel like this could be a more efficient offense than they were a season ago.
That's certainly what they're banking on right now. Cadeau is one of those real pass-first point guards. He doesn't really shoot it particularly well, which I think they're going to have to figure out, ways to account for that. And you mentioned that maybe you have a slightly better shooting front court, and some of those things going to help you out. But yeah, if he can show he's just like a reasonable perimeter shooter this year to the point where teams have to guard him, that'd be huge. He was a little better as a sophomore in North Carolina, got up to like low 30s on pretty low attempts, but not a great free throw shooter, doesn't seem to have a ton of touch, but he's just going to created a lot of assists for people, averaged 6 a game last year, and I think he'll have better weapons around him this year too. So yeah, having that setup guy, I think will really let them kind of do what they do best.
Yep, I agree with you, and that's going to be a lot of fun to watch out there in the Big Ten. As joining me, we've got Matt Modderno, who does a great job over at Mid-Major Madness. He does a great job with DMV Hoops and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I know that this is a conference that you don't look at as much, but a few years ago, we were talking about Houston with regards to Mid-Major Madness when they were out there in the American, and getting back Milos Uzan, just absolutely incredible for them. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to seed Houston going into the season because they're going to be losing a few guys like Sharp down low, but still, this is a Houston team that they're going to be returning much of that backcourt from a season ago, and I'm hard-pressed to not put them in my top 3 to begin the season.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. When I saw the Pop Isaacs news that he was decommitting and going to...
And honestly, that didn't feel like it was going to be the world's best fit to start with.
Right. He was just, hey, we needed a body, with some upside here. And obviously, if we can get Uzan, you keep him. And, for Isaacs, it's like, all right, cool. I don't want to be essentially the 4th guard in the rotation here because they have a talented freshman, Kingston Fleming, coming in too. So for Uzan coming back, he was very committed to being in the draft. I talked to some people, that represent him, and they said he was kind of all in, focused on that. So I think he didn't get the feedback he was looking for necessarily. And, the sales pitch from Houston is, hey, make another deep tournament run and show people that what you did in the tail end of the season as you were really coming on, strong there is something you can do for an entire season here and hopefully convince people that that's the player you've really turned into. And obviously we've seen this with Houston now with a couple guards in a row here. LJ Cryer really built himself up over a couple of years there. And before him, Jamal Shed and Marcus Sasser had a lot of, success later in their Houston careers here too. So if you're Uzan, that's the pitch from Houston. I think the thing you worry about here is just from, kind of a mouths to feed perspective here, right? Like they've got a lot more talented freshmen coming in, guys that are a little more heralded that don't really fit the same mold. So it's, can you really balance the egos and people that are all trying to get themselves to the league with a guard who's come back, who's clearly intent on finding a way to get himself drafted in the first round essentially next year. So just Kelvin Sampson's going to have a little work cut out for him there, I think, to just manage, all the egos and everything like that. But he seems to have a knack for those sorts of things and the player personnel aspect of it. So if anybody can do it, it's certainly him. But it is an interesting wrinkle that they haven't had to deal with a ton so far.
Yep, they have not, but if there's a man that I'm going to bank on to be able to do so, it's Kelvin Sampson, because I just take a look at the hierarchy of coaches, and he is one of the guys I certainly put at the top of it, and I think that he's going to do a very rock-solid job on that front. And what else is pretty rock-solid is what we're seeing right now with Maryland, because I know you do a great job of being able to cover Maryland, everything out there in the DMV area, and they bring in Mr. Passamore from Kansas. Wasn't able to get out there on the floor this past season, but Rakees Passamore, he's going to be heading on over to Maryland. And just how do you take a look at this sort of an addition? Because this almost feels like a little bit of what we saw last season from Maryland, where they took a few upside guys. Like, I think that the most notable of them from a season ago is what you were able to get in the backcourt for them, and what they were able to get out of Rodney Rice, a guy that was very highly touted but was just a little bit banged up. And adding a guy like a Passmore in this system, I think, is very big for a Maryland team that I'm sure that you'd agree with me, going to be looking a little bit different this season.
Yeah, a lot of new faces and a totally new style of play, most likely too. So I think, yeah,
going to have more than a starting 5 and nothing else, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You might not have the same quality of player, in the top 5 there, but certainly 5 through 12, I think they'll be so much deeper. And that's really sort of what Buzz Williams sort of predicates himself on, is being able to like platoon out whole stretches of guys. And the starters aren't always necessarily the best 5 players on the team. So there's some, intermixing of guys that should be starters with bench players. So it's going to be really interesting to see just how he makes those pieces all fit. But Passmore's an exciting one. Obviously didn't play a lot at Kansas, as you mentioned, but this is a top 50 guy. And, he got to that point for a reason. And he was a pretty productive player at Combine Academy in North Carolina in 2024. Averaged 19 points a game, 5.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, shot 35% from 3. So it was a guy that did a little bit of everything. He's a crazy athlete. He says he's only been playing basketball for about 6 years. So this is someone that hopefully, as you kind of, polish the diamond there a little bit, there's more, talent to pick from and build on. And this is somebody that hopefully, if it's not this year, hopefully with next year's season, you can take an even bigger jump forward.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that it's going to be really interesting to just take a look at the dynamic that we're going to be getting with Maryland because Passmore, he's a little bit of an upside guy. I think that we both agree this is someone that you can't necessarily bank on to be like some sort of double figure scorer or something like that. You're hoping that he can be, and he certainly has the potential to be able to do so, but he's a guy that you're taking a look and you're thinking, all right, we might be able to get something out of him, we might not, but I look at the entirety of this roster, and you've also got David Hewitt who comes in. I think that's a little bit more of a proven piece. Farrell Payne, we saw what he was able to do in this very Buzz Williams system a season ago, and then a guy in Miles Rice who knows all about the Big Ten. I think that they've done a really good job of just being able to balance this roster, and then being able to add a guy like a Passmore, that's just a cherry on top to where it could take a good team to being really, really good if he pans out.
Yeah, you've got two total unknowns coming in that were top 75-ish, top 100 guys in Andre Mills and George Turkson, both out of the Boston area that redshirted last year for Texas A&M, that they're high on, and they're both athletic guys at sort of Mills is a big guard, and Turkson's another 3/4 kind of guy like a Solomon Washington. So it'd be interesting to see, the jump they're ready to take, since their high school season and having to sit out that year. So I think there's just a bunch of unknowns. Can those guys come in and play? They're bringing in a Spanish point guard, Guillermo Del Pino, another guy that did well in the FIBA under 16 level, and supposedly is going to be able to come in and contribute from day one. So I think that'll be interesting. They just signed 2 more freshmen, and Josiah Harper, an athletic 6'7" wing, and Alex Alston, a 6'10" stretch forward type, and also the son of Steve Blake. Nick Blake is coming in here as well. So you got a son of a legendary Terp coming in here too. So we'll see if he can, bring anything in year one. But just a lot of intriguing pieces, and it's just going to be one of those things where I think you just throw a bunch of them out there and you see what sticks, and you hope enough of these guys pop to make a deep tournament run.
And I must say, I don't know if you felt old saying Steve Blake's son, but that made me feel a little bit old as well, because it's like, man, I remember playing as Steve Blake on a lot of video games when I was in high school and I was in college. So, yep, absolutely. As joining me on the show, we've got Matt Modderno. He does great work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you do a little bit of everything because you're obviously out there in the DMV area. You do the DMV Hoops podcast. You do some work over at Mid-Major Madness as well. And I just want to get your thoughts as to a few teams over the last few weeks that you feel like have really made some nice additions. Like, I take a look at what we were able to get with regards to Ahmad Robinson having gone over to UAB. Felt like they were a little bit slow going out there in the transfer portal. They've added a few guys over the last few days. Very ironically, obviously, we're talking about Yaxel Lendeborg heading out over to Michigan, but I thought that was very big for them. Are there a few other teams that you take a look at over the last few weeks that maybe it felt like their off seasons were incomplete to start out with, but now they're starting to be able to find it, and now you feel like they're really set for what's going to be a good season?
I would say one that didn't pop the way I thought they would. I was sort of under the assumption that PJ Haggerty was going to end up back at Memphis somehow, and they offered him, it sounded like $3 million in NIL originally. He was willing to pass on that, put himself in the draft consideration there, and sort of shop his name around to other schools. And they left the door open to eventually take him back. Seems like he came full circle back around to them, and their offer had decreased. And now he's, taking less money. They go to Kansas State. It seems like it sounds like somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million this time. So maybe just kind of by exploring all of his options there, shot himself in the foot a little bit. But I don't really know what you do if you're Memphis to replace a guy like that. And honestly, it might have been worth the extra, $500K if they could drum it up, essentially, because All-American caliber point guard's going to be really tough to replace. And they bring in a guy like Doug McDaniel that was actually at Kansas State, so it's kind of a swap. So just going to be really interesting to see what Penny Hardaway does next year to make up for that. And obviously, a guy we mentioned, this is not a mid-major one, but Pop Isaac's going to Texas A&M now to play for former Samford head coach Bucky McMillan, try to play some Bucky ball. They get Kenzie Mbako back, the Indiana transfer, pulled his name out of the draft. Had a couple good combine performances too, so I think this is a guy that, with a more creative offensive coach than someone like Mike Woodson, could really pop, and having a guard in the backcourt like Isaacs gives him a little bit more to work with. So I'm actually thinking that Texas A&M has had a sneaky good offseason and can maybe make a little noise in the SEC than maybe people were projecting.
Oh, I think that they're one of the most interesting teams in all of college basketball. I'm so glad that you mentioned that because, for lack of a better term, to use a language of the kids, they just have dudes right now with the way that they've been able to bring in all this talent. I have no idea if Bucky McMillan is going to be playing the same style that he did at Stanford because I just don't know if that translates to the SEC, but I think the style that he plays is going to be very interesting because he's got a lot of size. He brings in something like a Rashawn Agee from USC, Frederico, so nice that they named him twice twice. He comes on over from Texas Tech. They bring in Rylan Griffin. They bring in Josh Holloway. He was one of the main guys that came on over with him from Stanford. You mentioned Mbakpo. I look at this Texas A&M team, and just talent alone, it feels like they could be a top 25 team. I just don't know what style they're going to be able to play to be able to back that up, though.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to adapt. I mean, what he did at the mid-major level, we'll have to see if it translates against, bigger, more athletic guys at the SEC level. You're probably the most athletic league in college basketball right now. So not sure the same pace and freneticism and things like that are necessarily conducive to winning in that conference. So it's going to be a fun experiment to see. And I think for a guy like that, just coming up, a pretty big weight class shift for him, it's just going to be a little trial and error and seeing what sticks, and going to have to be flexible enough to kind of, tinker and tweak things on the fly too.
Yep, no question about it. That, I think, is going to be a real fun team to be able to take a look at. And Matt, I know that you're having a lot of fun taking a look at all things college basketball. You're out there in the DMV area, so you're doing a nice job taking a look at Maryland, those mid-majors like George Washington, George Mason, what have you. And I know you're really doing a great job covering the entire scope of basketball as well. So you also do a little bit of NBA work. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. Also host the Believe in Wizards podcast, BLEAV in Wizards, with former Washington Wizard Jahadi White, also played Georgetown, and write for Bullets Forever, the SB Nation blog covering the Wizards. So yeah, like you said, doing a little bit of everything here. It's an interesting time of year for NBA draft. So we'll have a whole lot of stuff about player profiles and things like that, and specifically what the Wizards should do with the 6th pick. So should be fun to look at.
Yeah, but what the Wizards should do is, man, try to not do what they've done the last few years, because that's not been great to say the least. But what is great is everything that Matt is doing. He does a tremendous job being able to cover the entire scope of basketball, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Matt for joining me on Cuz He's now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Then we next, let's recap all that we saw in college basketball on Tuesday. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It was great to be joined by Matt Modderno. He does great work over at DMV Sports. I know that he's doing an absolutely excellent job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He does a great job with the Inside Maryland Sports website as well. You're able to just take a look at all of his work, Mid-Major Madness as well. He's doing some top-notch work, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Matt for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Two very significant NBA draft decisions. Milos Uzan, he has decided that he is going to be going back to Houston. I know that there's a lot of people that thought that he was as good as gone, that he was probably going to be working his way into being a first-round draft pick. And this guy just did an amazing job of being able to fill the shoes of Jabal Shed, lead Houston to the title game last year. 11.5 points per contest, shot north of 42% from three-point range, 4.3 assists, 1.4 turnovers per game. And he got better as the season went along. Was averaging 12 plus points per contest when it came to conference play, and I think that that's what's really encouraging for this Houston team. The fact that Milos Uzan just, it felt like with every single game, he was giving you a little bit more. Now, I will say, in the final 3 games of that NCAA tournament run, he did either have 6 or 7 points, so I mean, a little bit of slippage there, but if you want to take it a little bit further, from January 2nd on, so this is a pretty big sample size to end the season. That would be 23 games in total. The team went 21-2 in that stretch. He was shooting from three-point range 47.3%, averaging 13.3 points per contest and just 1.6 turnovers per game. Massive impact on Houston. Absolutely love the fact that he is going to be back. And Yaxel Lendeborg, he is going to be indeed going on over to Michigan. He was averaging 17.5 points, 11.4 rebounds, 4.2 assists per contest. And this guy showed some versatility, shooting 36% from three-point range at 6'9". And for Michigan, this is exactly what they're looking for, because they lose Danny Wolf in the offseason, who he was able to do a nice job of being able to space the floor. And is Yaxel Lendeborg going to be able to give you just quite as much with regards to the facilitation? No, but at the same time, he's going to be able to help Michigan be rock solid down low. He's going to do a nice job in terms of being able to make sure that these guys are able to have a lot of space out there on the exterior as well. Michigan has done a nice job here in the transfer portal, being able to add in there some guards to be able to make them all the more lethal as well, because the issue that you had with Michigan last season was the turnovers. I think that they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job on this front, as you've got Elliot Cadu, who's just a really good steady Eddie point guard, wasn't necessarily the world's greatest scorer over in North Carolina, but he knows how to dole it out. He knows how to get it to these guys. Morris Johnson is going to be rock solid on the glass. Ade Mera at 7'3". He's got a little bit of versatility as well. Very big pickup here for Michigan. Absolutely love this one. And with those two big NBA draft decisions, we saw a little bit of ripple effect as well. Pop Isaacs, who he was supposed to be going on over to Houston, you figured that he was going to be filling a little bit of a role there. Probably wasn't going to be quite what Milos Uzan was going to be, but he was going to be a nice off-the-ball scorer. He has decided that he is now going to be going to Texas A&M, who's had themselves a really nice haul because they get back in Mackenzie Mbakbo as well. Mackenzie Mbakbo was exploring his options for the NBA draft. He had already committed to Texas A&M, and he's decided that he's going to be coming back. Guy that shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, 6'8", relatively good versatility. And for Isaacs, last season got injured, but last we saw him in a full season over at Texas Tech was a nice, solid double-figure scorer. Now, for Isaacs, leaves a little bit of something to be desired on the defensive side of things, and throughout his career has been a little bit of a missed three-point shooter. Last season, he showed very well in his 8 games at Creighton, was shooting 38.5% for three. First year at Texas Tech, shot about 38% from the outside, and then year number 2 was shooting about 29% from three. So we'll see how he comes off of injury. Guy that is able to give you a bit of facilitation, as he over last years was giving you about 3.5 assists per contest. But I think that this is really nice for a Texas A&M team that I was talking about with Matt in the previous segment. I don't quite know what system they're going to be running, because with Bucky McMillan, when he was over at Sanford, they would always play a high pressure system. They had a whole bunch of guards, and they don't necessarily have quite as many guards with regards to the system. They do pick up Isaacs, which I felt like that was very much needed for that backcourt, and they've got Chakari Lane, who comes on over from North Alabama, but they don't have like a bunch of guys that just generate a high amount of steals or anything like that. Mbakbo is a 6'7", a little bit of a combo player. You bring in Zach Clemens, who can be rock solid down low from Kansas. Frederico, so nice they named it twice. He's rock solid down low. Rashawn Agee is a nice rebounder. So the system that they're going to be playing is going to be a big giant question mark. That said, one thing that is very undeniable is the talent. Been a very good last 24 or so hours for Texas A&M. You've got Joey Matuni. He was over at Drake this last season. He redshirted, and he's just another one of those guys that is going to be coming on over and playing for Mr. Ben McCollum, and that's been very smart with Ben McCollum. Since he got to Iowa, he decided that his first priority was going to be taking care of the guys that were able to be so good on that Drake team last season. They're going to be bringing in Khalil Combs, Tavion Banks. You've also got, obviously, the biggest one in Bennett Sturts, but Cam Maniwu, who is so rock solid down low as well. All these guys are going to be coming over, so this is another one of those guys. Now, they haven't necessarily brought in a whole bunch of splashy guys outside of that, but I do like Alvaro Falgurias. He was over at Robert Morris this last season, 6'9" guy that's able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, average yard near a double-double. Brandon Housen, nice off-the-ball scorer that was able to shoot 40+% from three-point range over at Kansas State, so I do love what is being built over there, and I think that they are going to be a very good team out there in the Big Ten. You don't want to be sleeping on those guys. You also don't want to be sleeping on UAB, though, either. They do lose Yaxel Lendeborg, but they do pick up Ahmad Robinson on Tuesday, as he was very good over at Mercer this last season. 17 points, actually began his career out there in the America East, so he's been a well-traveled man. 5 boards, 5 assists, 1.9 steals per contest. Not necessarily going to completely light you up from three-point range, but he's got the ability to pop it from three, and UAB never has been and never will be one of these teams that is just super incredible from three-point range. Robinson, about a 31.5% three-point shooter this last season, but for UAB, felt like it was a little bit slow going for them in the transfer portal, but over the last few days, they've been able to do a nice job, be able to add some guys. Robinson, I think it might be their biggest pickup of the offseason, and for the team, they're not going to be quite the same down low without Yaxel Lendeborg. That said, this is a bunch that they've done a nice job to be able to retool with Kyron Lindsey coming on over from Murray State. He was actually the top rebounder over at Georgia about 2 years ago before he decided that he was going to be leaving that program. Chance Westery, 6'6", a little bit of a combo guy that comes in from Syracuse. Jacob Meyer is pretty solid out there in the backcourt as well. And Paul Joubert, who was over at Miami, was able to see some pretty meaningful minutes out there in the ACC. So they've done a nice job being able to mix and match, and I think that he, moving forward, is going to be able to give you a bit of something. Then in terms of another NBA draft decision, this one was very much one that should not surprise anyone. Toby Lual, he's decided that he is going to be returning back to school, and he's going to be back at Virginia Tech this upcoming season. Was very rock solid when he was over at VCU a few seasons ago, and he was like the lone guy that gave you anything over at Virginia Tech last season. Was good with his overall versatility, as he was able to do a nice job giving the team 12+ points per contest, from 3-point range. He was able to add in there a little bit of something as well. So that's going to be big moving forward as he was able to shoot about 37% from 3-point range for Virginia Tech. I think that it's going to be a little bit a better year this year than what they had last season. That's really not saying a lot because they were banking on Isaiah Miller to be their main point guard, and he got suspended with a gambling suspension, so that's not tremendous. They brought in Amani Hansberry, who I think is going to be able to elevate this team moving forward. Guys like Jaden Schuett and company are going to be returning from season ago, so I do think that this is going to be a better year for Virginia Tech. I do think that Mike Young is a solid coach, not necessarily the most amazing coach, but you know what, relatively solid. And then Alex Condon, he has decided that he is going to be returning to Florida as well. This is one that I very much saw coming. I'm not surprised that Florida is going to have him back, but this is looking like a team that should be at the very minimum in your top 5 in terms of preseason, as they picked up Boogie Flan in the last week or two after he decided to withdraw from the NBA draft. They're going to also have Ruben Chinyelu back for that front court as well. So you do lose quite a few of those backcourt pieces. There's going to be no replacing a guy like a Walter Clayton, but having Thomas Howell at 6'9" be able to give you some good versatility. Savion Lee was a nice double-figure scorer over at Princeton, and that's able to do a bit of everything. A.J. Brown, I don't know what he's going to be able to provide you coming in from Ohio, but he was a double-figure scorer over there. And Urban Klavzar, the international man of mystery who really didn't see a lot of playing time last season, I think that he's going to be able to add quite a bit of something as well. So that's very impactful. Bruce Thornton, he has decided that he is going to be returning to school as well. This is one that I did see coming. You didn't necessarily get the best feedback from these NBA scouts, but he was able to shoot darn near 40% from 3 last year. 17.5 points, 4.5 assists, 3.5 rebounds per game. It's an Ohio State unit that they really just felt a little bit top heavy last season. They had those main guys that were able to come through for them. It felt like they just needed a little bit more depth in general. I do think that Diebler is going to be able to do a solid job with this program moving forward. I think the big question is, what are you going to be able to get out of this team alongside of Bruce Thornton in the backcourt? Because down low, they appear to be pretty set. Josh Ojowana comes on over from Baylor. That should be able to help them out. 7-footer Christoph Tilley is actually able to pop it a little bit from 3-point range. Devin Royals back from a season ago. Gabe Cupps is a big question mark, though. John Mobley Jr. was a pretty rock-solid running mate as well, and I'm very intrigued by what you're going to be able to get out of Brandon Noel as well. So, for Iowa State, I feel like they're a little bit lost in the sauce in the Big Ten. It's going to be a Big Ten that's going to have a lot of teams that are going to be probably good but not great, because, well, that's what you always get from the Big Ten. But certainly I think that is going to be a solid pickup for them, and I do think that for Bruce Thornton, he's going to be able to have himself a big year for Iowa State. Jusan Sanan, he has decided that he is going to be going back to St. John's, and he was over at Arizona State last season. He had decided in the transfer portal that he was going to be going over there, and I think that this makes the decision very, very clear that we are not going to be seeing R.J. Luis back to St. John's. I thought that the writing was on the wall to start with, but Sunan should be able to help out the overall shooting for the team. Last season over at Arizona State, 12 points per contest, shot 37% from 3-point range. The defense did leave a little bit of something to be desired, but I think that he's going to be able to help St. John's just have a little bit more of an element from the outside for this upcoming season, and I think that is a very impactful move as well. And then you've got Brendan Laurent, who was going through the NBA draft process. He averaged 11.5 points per contest over at North Texas. He decided that he was going to be heading on over with Russ Hodge over to West Virginia. He decided that he was going to withdraw from the NBA draft process. This is very much one that we saw coming. No real impact there, but figured we would pass that along, as well as we've had a lot of NBA draft decisions go down, and we're going to be covering all those along with all that we're seeing in the transfer portal the next few days right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please just send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to Matt Modderno. He does great work over at Mid-Major Madness, DMV Hoops, and so much more. Join me in live segment, and I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.